Good morning, everyone. Please take your seats. We will start our session.
Then because it really is. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you enjoyed last night's reception. And as you know, we have a few agenda items to consider in the plenary. And if we are very efficient, then we can complete the consideration of all the substantive items by the plenary in the morning, if we try. If we try very hard. And devote maybe the afternoon to contact groups. But we have to be very efficient in that case. So today, first, let us have a quick report back from the two contact groups. Contact group on VSLS, which was held yesterday. And today morning, we had the contact group on atmospheric monitoring. So first, I would like to give the floor to one of the chairs of the VSLS contact group. Heidi.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, co-chairs. We had our second meeting in the contact group on very short-lived substances yesterday over lunch. This time we had the proponents present the CRP again, and then we started a discussion of the operational paragraphs. However, we could not manage to finalize the discussion, and we would therefore welcome additional time in this meeting to at least have a chance to go through all the operational paragraphs. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we have had two meetings. And therefore, we will try to give some more time, maybe later in the week. And now I would like to give the floor to one of the co-chairs of the contact group on monitoring, atmospheric monitoring. Who would? Alessandro?
Okay. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, and good morning, everyone. We had our first contact group this morning. We had a very interesting sessions on questions and answers, and I think we might need some additional time and for go along with our work. So we we are in your hands when you want to provide us another slot during the week. Thank you also on behalf of my co-chair.
Thank you. We will give you another slot, maybe tomorrow. The time in the room will be projected on the screen later on. With that, I would like to hand over to my co-chair, Ralph.
Thank you, Miruza, and good morning, everybody. And as Miruza said, we really would like to speed up a little bit. And let's say when we speed up and we are ready this morning, there are several delegations, especially England and me, would be very happy because we have some time to watch an important game. So, let's say, and what is nicer than make a co-chair happier for you? So, and maybe I'm even happier after 6 o'clock, but you never know. I would like now to go back to a CRP or agenda item 3B on feedstock uses of controlled substances. There was a CRP put forward, and I would like to give the floor to Australia to introduce the CRP.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair, and good morning to everyone. Yes, on behalf of this delegation, Canada, Norway and Switzerland, we are happy to introduce CRP4 into plenary, which is a draft decision on feedstock uses of controlled substances. As this and other delegations mentioned during our discussions on this agenda item on the first day, we were expressed concern about the increasing use of feedstock and therefore the subsequent increasing emissions that would be coming from feedstock uses of controlled substances, I think which has been seen in the atmospheric measurements of these controlled substances. So we have coordinated on CRP4, which we have put forward for consideration, which essentially reflects those concerns and urges parties to do their best and to take steps to minimise their emissions of controlled substances, either used as feedstocks or produced for feedstock use, or in their transportation, storage, distribution, handling, repackaging in the supply chain of these substances being used as feedstock. So this is about OP1 is continue taking steps to minimise the emissions of these substances. Operational paragraph 2 is encouraging parties to use the best practices to reduce emissions. Paragraph 3 clarifies the reporting requirements that unintentional production should be reported where such production is measurable. And then paragraphs 4 and 5 are a little bit more policy oriented in terms of trying to get a sense from parties that have national procedures and frameworks in place for the management of such production and use, that sharing that information and sharing information about those national frameworks with the Ozone Secretariat, and then asking this Ozone Secretariat to summarise that information. So that we feel could be quite a useful compendium of approaches that might be useful for parties. And then the last paragraph is requesting the Executive Committee to consider a small funding envelope to support a couple of production sector related projects to demonstrate best practices and minimising emissions of controlled substances used as feedstock. We feel that this would potentially provide some useful quantitative information for parties that would assist parties in reducing emissions and develop and sharing that information with others. So I am very happy, of course, for our co-sponsors to augment what I have indicated, provided by information, by way of information this morning. But otherwise, we would be very happy to look at the CRP in a contact group. Thank you very much, Co-Chair.
Thank you for introducing the CRP. And I would like the room if there are reactions on the CRP. I see India. India, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Good morning, everybody. These issues of feedstock is being discussed for the past many years, and this issues is being raised every year with new elements. And this delegation expressed its views on the issues in details during the OEWG45 and MOF35. We feel there is no point in relating the issues, raising these issues every year, and we feel there is no need for further discussion. The MC Talks can continue to update its progress report. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
And the next one is Bahrain on my list. Please, Bahrain.
Shukran. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Thank you to the presenter of the CRP, Australia, Switzerland, Canada, and Norway. Very briefly, I would like to join my voice to what we've just heard from the good delegate from India. We share the same vision that has been already expressed. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you. I have Argentina on my list.
Gracias, señor copresidente.
Thank you, Co-Chair. As others have said, we believe that this subject that we are examining year after year during each meeting, but we have yet to approve anything on the subject, and in my view, there is no sense in continuing to insist on this issue. Unless, and truly, unless we have a specific special program with additional financing, because in this document, what is being asked for is for studies to be carried out and for national ozone services to be involved, but they are not able to be at the level to carry out these projects unless it is funded by the Multilateral Fund. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have on my list the US, please.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Mr. Co-Chair. I think we saw some new information this year in the report, and we certainly asked some questions about the emissions factors, for example, earlier this week, and we also noted some other information in the TEEP report. So from this delegation's point of view, I think we do think this is worth a discussion in a group, and we'd be happy to participate, and we're in your hands as to how you want to establish that. Thank you.
Thank you. I see now the EU on my list and then Norway, so EU, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and we thank Australia and co-sponsors for introducing the CRP. As we had a discussion already on this issue, it is quite important. The TIEP alerts us to a significant increase in production, significant increase in emissions. It's likely to grow into the future, so it's certainly something we should be at least talking about, what we are going to do about this growing issue of concern. So we very much support having a contact group on this issue and discuss the CRP. Thank you very much.
The next one is Norway, and then Canada. First Norway.
Thank you, Co-Chair, and good morning, colleagues. Thank you to the delegate of Australia for presenting the CRP. We have heard carefully to the intervention of previous speakers, and for us, really, it is not really the need for asking the TIP about more information. At this stage, we have received a lot of reports, many of them over the past years. We have received comprehensive information that are reaffirming our concerns. We believe that it is time now that we engage in discussion to figure out which kind of action could be done within this body for addressing this issue. So we will support to have a discussion in a contact group. Thank you, Co-Chair.
Thank you. Then I have Canada and Saudi Arabia on my list, but Canada first.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and thank you to the delegate of Australia for introducing this CRP. I just wanted to quickly address some of the points that have been made by some parties. It's true that there has been, several decisions related to feedstock over the past years, but I think those decisions have actually helped the parties in getting a better understanding of these issues. Particularly, this last report provides us with a wealth of information on where controlled substances for feedstocks are used, potential emissions, as well as a review of possible alternatives and alternatives pathways to substitute the use of controlled substances. So I think it's just in recognition of this report and acknowledging what appears to be potentially very, very significant emissions coming from the production and use of controlled substances as feedstock, that in this draft decision, we now turn not again to the TEEP, because I think, India mentioned, we could ask the TEEP to update its reports, and I think, yes, they will do that for the quadrennial assessment, but as Norway indicated, this is not really the purpose that we're looking at here. We're looking at what it is that could be done as parties to address this issue. And I think what's being asked, is not something that would actually involve a significant burden to parties. The first paragraph is in a sense reiterating and reminding parties of decision 412, where we agreed to minimize emissions of ODS coming from feedstock uses. The second paragraph I just want to come back to, but just to say then the other ask of parties is in paragraph 4 is an invitation to submit information. So clearly, this is for parties who are interested and who want to provide information. We don't see that this creates a burden or that there's a need for financing in order for parties to do that. If you want to refuse the invitation, then you're free to do that. So really here what's new perhaps is a second paragraph in terms of encouraging parties to promote the use of best practices and technologies, which we think is probably one of the most important here in this draft decision, because really based on what the TEEP has provided, in the short term at least, the most feasible way to reduce emissions is through the application of best practices and technologies at the plant level. And for this, it was mentioned, if something needs to be done, there should be some financing attached to it, where there is a request for the XCOM in paragraph 6 to consider establishing a funding envelope to support up to 2 production sector projects to demonstrate best practices and technology. So the only significant ask for parties, first of all, is just an encouragement, and that encouragement is linked to a financial request to the multilateral fund in order to support it. So I think we tried, the co-sponsors tried to really draft a decision that would make some steps towards addressing this issue, wouldn't impose too much burden on Article 5 or non-Article 5 countries, and when it does, to link it to some provision of some financing. Thank you.
Thank you. Then I have on my list Saudi Arabia and then Switzerland. Saudi Arabia, please.
Good morning. Thanks. We thank the technical team. We thank all the committees that have come up with this presentation and these rich proposals that have benefited us in one way or another. I do have some remarks. These substances, these are supposed to be used in order to produce final substances. So we need to monitor the production lines in order to control the emissions through the production line, through addition of processing chemicals. Perhaps we need to control both the feedstock substances and the final substances through their life cycles in terms of their storage, their transportation, promoting the safety measures in industries, increasing our public awareness when it comes to dealing with such products, and not just the feedstock substances. Thank you for allowing me to express these views.
I have Switzerland and then Libya. And I really would like to ask parties who would like to speak, please indicate, and otherwise I will close the list. So Switzerland and Libya. And I don't see anybody else wanting to have the floor, so I close the list. So first, Switzerland.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and good morning, colleagues. I would like to echo the previous interventions from parties who supported to continue the conversations on this important topic of feedstock. Actually, this is not just revisiting the previous conversations we had in the last meetings. There are several very new aspects that we just saw also when the CRP was introduced. In particular, there's this call to the ExCom to consider funding for projects that contribute to reduce emissions from feedstock. This paragraph responds directly to a request that we heard in previous meetings from parties to look for ways to assist parties in this endeavor to reduce feedstock emissions, maybe including capacity building as well. So we think, since we have taken up this request, it would be very important to listen to those parties there, and hear out if, in their opinion, this way is a reasonable way forward to address the requests we heard and we talked about in the last meetings. So it's, in view of this delegation, a very important next step to have this discussion in a formal setting and make further steps to reduce emissions from feedstock that, how we learned, are bigger than we have anticipated before. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the last speaker on the list is Libya.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Actually, it's Lesotho, not Libya, but it's fine. Actually, I think this is a very good discussion because we understand that to make sure that we achieve our goal as to protect the ozone layer and the environment, we need to fill out every goal or every sector of the cycle, so that at the end of the day we may achieve close to 100% the requirement or the fulfillment of protecting the ozone layer and the environment. I don't think this at a number we are really looking forward to see the achievement under it, because I think it is going to very much assist in terms of maybe touching down on the ground in terms of those substances that still contribute, which we have not yet taken the decision on. So I'm very much looking forward to hear or to see the progress on this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Lesotho. You appear differently on the list. I will confer for a moment with my co-chair. Thank you. After a minute of consultations, we heard the different views here in the room how to proceed, and we are aware of that. And our proposal would be to see if we can continue this discussion or conversation in an informal group. We think it still would be useful to do it in this way, because there are some issues that maybe also can be clarified also by TEEP or SAP or others. So is this a way forward that is acceptable to the room, so that we proceed in an informal group? I don't see any objections to that. So then, let's say that Switzerland, I see Switzerland. Please, Switzerland.
Oh. Sorry. Just for clarification, Mr. Co-Chair, would an informal group mean to have the support by co-facilitators and the secretariats?
Yes.
Thank you.
So then the proposal is to continue in an informal group, and that's a time and a venue, and facilitators will be made clear later, but I can already mention that Michel Gonvin from Canada and Leslie Smith from Grenada are willing to co-facilitate this group. Then I would like to go to the next agenda item, and I have to go through my papers. That's agenda item 9. Please, TEEP, come already here to the podium because it takes some time. Then I will introduce this agenda item. It's a compliance deferral for Article 5 Group 2 parties, and TEEP made a technology review. In para 5 of decision 28/2 related to the GIALI element phasing down HFCs, TEEP was requested to conduct a technology review 4 or 5 years before 28 to consider a compliance deferral of 2 years from the freeze date of 28 for Article 5, Group 2 parties, to address growth above a certain threshold in relevant sectors. Chapter 8 of the 24 Progress Report of TEEP sets out the panel's response to that request. The Progress Report is available on the portal, and a summary is set out in document 46/2 at 1. So, team members, if you are seated, then I would like to ask you to make the presentation. And after the presentation, we have first a question and answer session. And I would like to ask Teep to be concise and brief and quick. And also the question and answer session, please be very specific in your questions. And then we have a more substantive discussion. But first, Teep will present their report. So, please, Teep, please, Bella, please start.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. On behalf, good morning, distinguished delegates, participants to the 46th Open-Ended Working Group meeting. On behalf of the TEEP and my working group co-chairs, Sueli Carvalho and Helen Walter Terraroni, I'm very pleased to begin the presentation of our response to Decision 28-2, Paragraph 5, a technical review of the alternatives relevant to Group 2 parties, which was Chapter 8 of the TEEP 2024 Progress Report. Decision 28-2, it was 8 years ago now. It was the decision, as the parties know, that established the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol. I refer to that because this paragraph 4 of Decision 28-2 requested the TEEP to conduct periodic reviews of alternatives beginning in 2022 and every 5 years thereafter. It requested the TEEP to use the criteria set out in a previous decision, 26-9, paragraph 1A, and to provide its technical and economic assessment of the latest available and emerging alternatives to HFCs. So our first report responding to paragraph 4 was in 2022. It was the September 2022 report, working group report on alternatives to HFCs. It was primarily based on the work that was ongoing at the time in the development of the 2022 TEEP and TOX assessment reports, which are shown there. Paragraph 5 of the decision requested the TEEP to conduct a technology review 4 or 5 years before 2028. So this is our current report responding to paragraph 5 of the 2016 decision. It requested TEEP to do a technical review in order for parties to consider a compliance deferral for Article 5 Group 2 parties to address growth above a certain threshold in relevant sectors. Decision 28-2 established the Article 5 Group 2 parties as those listed here: Bahrain, India, the Islamic Republic of Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Oman, Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. I don't have a slide here, but I just wanted to quickly review that the decision that established the criteria by which TEEP was to review and conduct this technical review, Decision 26-9, paragraph 1A, asked TEEP to update information on alternatives, considering energy efficiency, regional differences, and high ambient temperature conditions, in particular assessing whether they are commercially available, technically proven, environmentally sound, economically viable and cost-effective, safe to use, and easy to service and maintain. I just wanted to clarify that those were the criteria that we were asked to include in our technical review. In response to this decision on paragraph 5, TEEP established a working group from within its membership, including senior experts and the co-chairs of the various technical options committee. It also included experts from the RTOC, for which we were grateful for their contributions to our report. We would also take the opportunity at this time to thank the Ozone Secretariat and the Multilateral Fund Secretariat for their support of our work. In terms of this current 2024 technical review by the TEEP, this was a one-time assessment requested by the decision to respond to paragraph 5. And so we based our technical review, our current technical review, primarily on the September 2022 report. I will note that the 2022 technical review by the TEEP on alternatives to HFCs was conducted globally. The review focused on alternatives in all the relevant sectors. And in the current report, we have primarily focused on those sectors relevant to Group 2 parties. Where the information remains the same, we did not duplicate that information in our 2022 report. We refer to that report. Where there were sector updates that were notable for this 2024 review, as well as for Group 2 parties, we note that in the relevant sector sections. TEEP also considered, because this decision was back in 2016, and a lot has changed in 8 years in terms of a sort of progress in the transition and the phase down in HFCs. So we also considered what has happened, relevant changes that have happened since that decision and are relevant to Group 2 parties. We looked at updates to standards for refrigerants, as well as refrigeration, air conditioning, and heat pump equipment. We looked at technology conversion investment and demonstration projects that have been approved, implemented, or under implementation since 2016. And we looked at potential indicative activities happening in Group 2 parties that we saw in the 2024 to 2026 business plan under the Multilateral Fund. So our approach to respond to paragraph 5 was based on the terms of reference. We focused on our technical review on the alternatives relevant to Group 2 parties, as requested by the decision. We did not attempt to assess the individual national market dynamics or possible implementations plans, as those are not available to us. We did not qualify whether the alternatives would enable Group 2 parties to achieve certain reductions by certain dates. These would require us to have considered factors beyond those that were specified in the decision in terms of the criteria. We did not attempt to assess the relative ability of specific Group 2 parties to comply with certain control measures. Again, information in terms of their own implementation plans were not available to us. So TEEP defers to parties to consider or not any changes to the phase-down schedules. This is simply an outline of our report for this decision, and we'll follow this outline as we go through our presentation today. With that, I'll turn it over to our working group member and RTOC co-chair, Omar Abdelaziz. Thank you.
Thanks, Bella. So this section focuses on the status of alternatives in the RACHP sectors relevant to Group 2 parties. The RACHP sector continues to dominate the HFC consumption. In the TEEP 2016 report, it was estimated that the RACHP contributes to approximately 80% of the global GWP-weighted HFC emissions. More recently, country program data reported to the Multilateral Fund Secretariat by 117 out of 144 Article 5 parties show the same approximate range of 80% GWP-weighted emissions in the RACHP sector. The 2022 report findings remain relevant. Lower GWP alternatives to the popular high GWP HFCs are available for most RACHP applications, but there is limited accessibility to alternatives for some Article 5 parties. There is still rapid development of new lower GWP refrigerants. There are a number of significant RACHP applications with widely available alternatives with GWP less than 10. Examples include hydrocarbons, CO2, ammonia, and hydrofluoroolefins. And for some applications, alternatives with GWP of up to 750 can quickly be adopted, like HFC 32 and HFC HFO refrigerant blend R454B. While the technology is mature and lower GWP refrigerants are available, there is still some minimal use of high GWP HFCs in new equipment. Lower GWP alternatives adoption can be increased by measures to discourage import of equipment with high GWP HFCs, awareness programs related to lower GWP alternatives, and training related to the use of flammable refrigerants. As presented in the TEEP September 2022 report and remains relevant to all Article 5 parties, including Group 2 parties, some applications remain reliant on high GWP refrigerants, but these are in sectors with small consumptions relative to other RACHP applications, including transport refrigeration and ultra-low temperature systems. In transport refrigeration, including vans, trucks, and containers, R404A was the main refrigerant of choice. Now, the HFC HFO refrigerant blend R452A is widely available, and there are also other low GWP options under development. For ultra-low temperature systems like freezers for vaccines at -70 degrees C, cascade refrigeration system is used and can typically employ very high GWP gases like HFC perfluorocarbon or PFC refrigerant blend R508B. Lower GWP options are mainly in development stage. The working group found some commonalities among G2 parties, including most G2 parties have manufacturing enterprises producing RACHP units with local or mixed ownership and with varying capabilities for research and development. At least one G2 party, India, also manufacture components that are used for building RACHP units like compressors or motors. Manufactured units are mostly sold locally, but some parties have significant output made for export and need to respond to the importing party's requirement. All Group 2 parties are in geographically region with similar climatic conditions, although one party, India, is not defined as high ambient temperature country as per the definition set by the decision 28.2, paragraph 29. All Group 2 parties have minimum energy performance standards in place. However, the MEPs are not harmonized and use different temperature settings for the efficiency ratings and use different minimum efficiency levels. Group 2 parties are at varying stages of HCFC phase out, with some more advanced than the Montreal Protocol control targets. Due to the HCFC phase out by 2024, the use of HCFC refrigerants in Article 5 parties has significantly decreased. All Group 2 parties import HFC-based units across most RACHP applications. The criteria specified in paragraph 1A of decision 26-9 that TEEP was requested to consider in its technical review: commercial availability, technically proven, environmental soundness, economic viability and cost effectiveness, safety, and ease to service and maintain. We found these criteria similar to the ones used in 2022 report. They are fully explained in this year's technical review, as well as the backup slides attached to the posted presentation. For the criteria of commercial availability, we consider both availability and accessibility of refrigerants and RACHP products. TEEP recognizes that some refrigerants that are commercially available globally are not necessarily accessible in all Article 5 parties. TEEP did not find a distinguishing factor for Group 2 parties in this criterion. For the criterion of environmentally sound, TEEP recognizes that environmental soundness is a relative term and can depend on the geographical region. There are variations that are a factor of either policy and local legislation or of certain industry trends that are specific to some parties. Group 2 parties are in the mainstream of environmental stewardship, particularly since the region's hosting of COP28 and its breakthrough decisions. TEEP did not find a distinguishing factor for Group 2 parties in this criterion. For the criterion of economically viable and cost-effective, TEEP recognized that the industrialized Article 5 parties might find some substances viable or mandatory for export, but not for the local market. TEEP did not find a distinguishing factor for Group 2 parties in this criterion. The criterion of safe to use in areas with high urban densities addresses the fact that some of the Article 5 parties have still not adopted international standards, while in others, even if the standard is accepted, it is not mandatory. The criterion also addresses the question of whether those parties have facilities for testing and the capabilities to test as per the standards. At higher ambient temperatures, the capacity of air conditioning equipment may need to be larger depending on the room size, which limits refrigerant charge with flammable refrigerants. On the criterion of ease to maintain or service, TEEP recognizes that all Article 5 parties may require training and mandatory certification procedures, like prescribing a minimum set of tools required for servicing flammable refrigerants. The 2024 TEEP decision 3511 on life cycle refrigerant management task force report categorizes leak minimization techniques by groups of parties based on their consumption. Group 2 parties fall within 3 groups of higher consumption brackets and share common characteristics with the other parties in those brackets. An example is India, which is a manufacturing hub for passenger vehicles by many global multinational companies. Those companies continue to use HFC 134A for vehicles manufactured for the local market, even though their parent companies might have switched to HFO 1234IF. In India, the cost involved to refill with HFO 1234IF is now as much as 5 to 10 times more expensive than that of HFC 134A. India might also consider manufacturing passenger vehicles for export using HFO 1234IF. However, that may not enable India to switch all its production to that substance. Another factor is related to the difficulties facing technicians operating at high ambient temperature conditions and their well-being. TEEP concluded that these conditions occur irrespective of the substance use, and the flammability of the refrigerant does not pose a higher risk at those conditions. TEEP did not find a distinguishing factor for Group 2 parties in this criterion. On the criterion of technically proven, TEEP considers that it is possible to produce a system using certain refrigerants that are accessible and technically proven in non-Article 5 parties, whilst the local industries or consumers in Group 2 parties might have reservation in accepting the product. There can be many reasons, including that the product is not tested for safety as per some international standards, lack of regulations, market pushback, lack of spare parts, lack of adequate training, and flammability or toxicity issues. Another factor that was considered by TEEP is the applicability to HAT conditions. Even though India is not listed as HAT party, yet still it has local regions that experience HAT conditions and require HAT-compatible products. HAT compatibility is related to energy efficiency and cooling capacity, both of which degrade with the increase in ambient temperature, especially for air-cooled products. Having taken all the above criteria into consideration for Group 2 parties, the only distinguishing criteria for accessibility in Group 2 parties is whether refrigerants are technically proven. TEEP reviewed and reconstructed the tables from the September 2022 report for RACHP applications and presents the next few slides the status of some alternatives for HFCs relevant to Group 2 parties. In the new tables, we list the applications for each category of products and addressing the alternatives that are technically proven and globally available, then listing the accessibility of Group 2 parties to those alternatives in the column. The third column describes the degree of accessibility in terms of limited use, growing use, or widespread use. TEEP listed the lower GWP alternatives in groups as follows: non-Montreal Protocol controlled substances, including multiple flammability and toxicity classes. These substances have very low to zero GWP and zero ODP and include ammonia, hydrocarbons, CO2, HFOs, and HCFOs. A2L refrigerants, these are Montreal-controlled substances that are mildly or lower flammable A2L. Here, A2L refers to the safety class of the refrigerants as per ASHRAE Standard 34 or ISO 817 and include HFC 32 and various HFC-HFO blends with GWPs between 140 and 1,100. And A1 refrigerant blends, these are Montreal-controlled non-flammable A1 safety class refrigerants with HFC or HFC-HFO blends with GWP that can exceed 1,100. The last group is refrigerants that are currently under considerations, and we use this term to refer to refrigerants that are either under development, testing, or have not been commercialized globally. These are refrigerants not accessible to Group 2 parties, but are listed here for completeness. In these tables, the GWP values are those used in Kigali Amendment of the Montreal Protocol. While we show some examples in the next 4 slides, the remaining tables are in the chapter and in the backup slides. It is important to note that there was not enough commercial information for the working group to do a thorough investigation across different Article 5 parties. Moreover, market information is dynamic as parties are finalizing the implementation of HPMPs and starting the implementation of KIPs. And Group 2 includes 10 varied parties. TEEP, however, tried to verify the information with local industries and experts in those parties. As mentioned in the first column, as mentioned earlier, the first column focus on the application. The second column presents the alternative refrigerants according to the different categories. Non-Montreal Protocol substances, A2L refrigerant blends, and A1 blends and refrigerants currently under consideration. And the third column describes the degree of accessibility in terms of limited use, growing use, or widespread use. As an example, for the category of factory-sealed domestic and commercial refrigeration appliances, this table here shows the widespread use of isobutane for domestic refrigerators and freezers in most Group 2 parties, growing use of hydrocarbons for commercial plug-in refrigeration in some Group 2 parties, and little use of heat pump tumble dryers in Group 2 parties. As another example, this table shows growing use of all alternatives in some Group 2 parties for all categories in food retail and food service refrigeration, condensing units, distributed systems, and large central systems. For air-to-air conditioners and heat pumps, we found that there is limited use of propane for small self-contained AC window units in Group 2 parties. For small split air conditioner, there is limited use of hydrocarbons and HFOs, growing use of hydrofluorocarbon 32 and other A2L refrigerants in some Group 2 parties, and various refrigerants that are not yet accessible in Group 2 parties or globally. For larger split and packaged AC equipment, we found that HFOs are accessible in most Group 2 parties, but extent of use is unknown. A2L refrigerants, HFC 32 and R454B, are growing in use in some Group 2 parties, and various refrigerants are currently under considerations and not accessible in Group 2 parties or globally. With that, I'd like to pass the floor to my co-chair, Sueli Carvalho.
Thank you, Omar. This section focuses on the status of alternatives in the foam, fire suppression, and medical and chemical sectors. Next. For foam, fire suppression, medical and chemical sectors, the 2022 report findings remain relevant for both G1 and G2 parties. Some updates. In foams, HFC 365 MFC has been reported as no longer commercially available. Production ceased in September 2023. Although there may be some HFC 365 MFC available in supply chains, no reports of new manufacture are known, and this alternative will not be commercially available once stocks are exhausted. In fire suppression, both G1 and G2 parties face the same barriers to the use of lower GWP alternatives. FK 5112 may become affected by proposed PFAS regulations and definitions in the EU and other parties. No significant updates for aerosol, solvents, semiconductor, electronics manufacturing, and magnesium production. For MDIs, global legislation and corporate policies of major pharmaceutical companies may accelerate the introduction of lower GWP pressurized MDIs in Article 5 parties. This could potentially mean lower GWP MDIs are available in Article 5 parties from 2026 onwards. The reduction in use of HFCs in Europe and United States may lead to security of supply and commercial pricing concerns for Article 5 parties, including India. The next section is on information on standards, regulations, and building codes. Standards, regulations, and building codes have been updated since 2016, incorporating learnings from company and industry-sponsored research. As the industry moves from conventional high GWP products toward lower GWP refrigerants, the safety classification of refrigerants are changing. Therefore, equipment and installation standards need to be updated to incorporate those changes. Some examples of equipment and components covered by standards include compressors, commercial refrigeration appliances, heat pumps, AC units, and dehumidifiers, and others shown in this slide. Important to note that several G2 parties participate in the Gulf Cooperation Council Standards Organization, and that some national standards, for instance, ASHRAE 15, have been adopted by G2 parties. Examples of international and regional RAC HP standards and more details can be found in Annex 2 of the report. We are presenting next some information on MLF-funded activities relevant to the G2 parties. Working group co-chairs requested the Multilateral Fund Secretariat to provide information that will enable parties to better understand the current situation of G2 parties with respect to relevant technology conversion activities, mindful that only A5 parties that ratified the Kigali Amendment are eligible to receive financial support from the MLF. Annex 3 of our report provides a number of examples of relevant technology conversion and demonstration projects approved under the MLF. Information is also provided on planned activities for G2 parties, which were included in the MLF Adjusted Consolidated Business Plan for 2024 and 2026. This information is presented in Annex 4, noting that at the time of submission of TIP's 2024 progress report, only India and UAE had ratified the Kigali Amendment, and that UAE does not receive financial assistance from the Multilateral Fund. Bahrain just ratified the Kigali Amendment on July 1st, 2024. The working group also noted that while HFC baseline period for G2 is 2024 to 2026, some parties, such as India, Oman, and Pakistan, have reported HFC consumption as in this table. In conclusion, in accordance with the terms of reference, TIP provided updates to its technical review of alternatives to HFC relative to J2 parties, based on the global technical review presented in its 2022 report. TIP did not attempt to qualify whether alternatives will enable G2 parties to achieve certain reductions in HFC consumption by a certain date, because such an assessment depends on other factors that are not related to the technical and economic criteria TIP was requested to assess. In addition, TIP did not attempt to assess the relative ability of G2 parties to comply with the control measures to phase down HFCs as adopted by the 28th MOP in 2026, which depends on their individual implementation approach. TIP provides its technical review and defers to parties to consider or not any changes to phase down schedule. So TIP's current technical review under paragraph 5 of Decision 28.2 reinforced key messages from its 2022 report, such as development of lower GWP alternatives for most application in all sectors supports HFC phase down globally. Alternatives in all sectors meeting technical criteria are in use by many parties, including G2 parties. Some technically proven alternatives accessible to all parties, including in G2 parties, have some challenges that were identified and which need to be addressed. For most of the criteria investigated, TIP working group did not find any distinguishing factor between G1 and G2 parties. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Teep. I think this was a very informative presentation, and thank you also for all the work you have done on this report. And I have already some speakers on my list, and I really would like to say there are questions, and please be brief and focused. And Teep, please stay here on the stage, that we don't have to dance like yesterday in the going back and forth. So the first one on my list is Kuwait, and then I have India, Saudi Arabia, and Canada. But Kuwait first.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair, and I will thank the TIEP for their reports and for their assessment in this one. I have some general comments and I have some questions, and so I will start about my comment when we talk about technically proven and operationally feasible. Criteria should be used for assessment in country in our regions. The capacity of AC with refrigerant circulating inside different room, as Professor was mentioning, location in order of approximately between 25 to 30 ton refrigeration or more. These equipment need to be energy efficient, and this is not being covered in your report. What is the effect of alternative against their energy? Because even if we want to transfer to this alternative, the energy side is something also a ban from our side to use this alternative, which is not being discussed here, and achieve the desirable cooling effects. This is very obvious. We need a clarity on whether these options are prevalent in today's context, because you are already talking about refrigerant, not the equipment and technology and energy related to that one. Large capacity systems are used in household. We are using large capacity in hot ambient. We are not using small because areas of cooling is very big. 32 is feasible for small capacities, as is mentioned in the report of TIEP. Previously, that cannot be used as big equipment, and it's not highly recommended to be used, especially for the limitation of charge. It's posed the safety challenges, and we didn't see that in the report. The second general comment is on use of low GWB. We do note that retrofit of residential and commercial is a challenging. Availability of these products suitable to our condition is not available, and you can check these issues. I think the parties have to understand, as a member of the EXCOM for a long time, and especially after reviewing 45 KIPs, approving this 45 KIPs, a lot of these KIPs with the implementing agency mentioning lack of alternative technologies. where your report mentioned it's feasible. So there is something in conclusion, I don't understand how to express it. So there is a mislanguages between technically questions and technically review. Is the implementing agency correct, or is the TIEB assessment correct? I think both entities have to sit together and discuss this one, because yesterday, day before, I listened to a meeting with MLF, all the implementing agency mentioning the lack of alternative to be discussed in the KIB. And now I see a very highly and shiny things that TIEB says that everything, and there is no distinguish between Group 1 and Group 2 with this flammability and energy efficient equipment to be approved. Safety and training, this is critical. We have mobile service technical, as you know, in our country, especially in GCC, supporting servicing and maintenance for this rock equipment. If this not fully addressed, both technically, assistant training and regulation technology adoption will not be operation feasible. Why? Because we don't have this equipment, so we start training on what? If you don't have a market penetration fully, then the training for local, it will be not desirable, because the supplier of this equipment, under his guarantee, he will train only his people. He cannot train the other one to engage within this one. So this is also a binding for us. Heat experience by countries is today contact is much higher. When we discuss in 2016 from 2013 about Kigali, the hot ambient temperature country was a certain era. In today's era, you are seeing that, I think, as I mentioned it yesterday, categorizing hot countries need carefully to be revisited. This implies that more countries could be facing accessibility of operational feasible technologies. There is a lot of countries now using air conditioning when they will never using air conditioning previously. So I think this is have to be very carefully drawing conclusion on availability of technology. Is issue of exemption will be increasing when we are mentioning this issue. The second thing, I was looking to the tables that for food retails and what is you do. This is a good issue for us to understand. But one question from my side, that for the small split AC, less than 12 kilo, you mentioned non-Montreal Protocol control substance, which is in presentation page number 19. You mentioned HFC is 127, and this is propylene. And I never hear that this is used for a small split unit. It's used for industrial refrigeration. So I need a clarification about this one. I never seen any mini split or any supplier that mentioning 127, so how we reached and land to that exercise. Other thing that in all the report, all this availability, all these challenges, I didn't hear from you in your report one line about PFAS. Group 2 will never face this PFAS regulation. They will not affect, there is no distinguish between Group 2 and Group 1 about this element. This is not something will limit our access to that one if this regulation was adopted. So I think you carefully didn't engage the PFAS issues to this selection of alternatives and selection of this one. One of the statements that mentioned in the report mentioned that the best things to give a chance to penetrate the market is to discourage importation, but you didn't mention discouraging exportation from supplying country from article from non-A5 parties. And this is a good statement from your side that you put the burden of us. If you go to the regulation of EU, they have a limitation for exportation, for refrigeration, is beyond 1,100, which is only consists that EU can export for Article 5 countries 404 and above 1,000, and this is not mentioned. And this is one of the limitations that we cannot do. One of explanation I need to understand, because you mentioned about harmonized MIPS and the testing. I think the only country in the Group 2 who have a different testing temperature is Kuwait. We are testing under 48, which T4. So how that can affect the penetration in the Group 2 for this alternative and technology, if you little bit Dr. Umar emphasized on this one. The last comment of mine is that you mentioned that have taken all these above criteria into consideration group 2 parties. The only distinguished criterion for accessibility in group 2 parties is whether refrigerant are technically proven. Who will prove that that refrigerant is proven and how that will affect? Because this statement, it's not clear for me. I don't understand what you mean about this one. I think it's a good issue, but in normal reading, I don't understand because usually there is no technology can be accepted if the refrigerant is not proven. So what the statement here from your side about this one? And I stop here and thank you very much.
Thank you. And Teep, you already can prepare for some questions. I will take up some more delegations who asked for the floor. India, and please indicate if you would like to ask questions to Teep now. So, but first, India.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. We would like to thank TEEP for carrying out the technology review and providing the information on alternatives to the controlled substances in various sectors and subsectors in 2024 TEEP progress report and for the presentation. As proposed by the co-chair, we would like to seek some clarification from the TEEP and later on make our detailed intervention on this issue. TEEP has indicated limited accessibility to alternative for some Article 5 parties. If further said that for some applications, alternatives with GWP of up to 750 can quickly be adopted. Can the TEEP clarify on adoption of such alternatives in systems with high charge quantity and in high ambient condition? Secondly, what could be the reasons for the low penetration of the low or lower GWP alternatives in large air conditioning systems? Thirdly, it has been stated that some applications are still reliant on high GWP refrigerants like transport and low temperature systems, etc. What are the likely low or lower GWP alternatives in these sectors and adoption capability in countries, particularly in high ambient conditions? Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you also by being very clear and concise with your questions to Teep. The next one on my list is Saudi Arabia, and then I have Canada and Bahrain. And I just wanted to clarify, are there others who would like to ask questions? Otherwise, I close the list. I don't see anybody else. Then Saudi Arabia has the floor. So I close the list with Saudi Arabia, Canada, and Bahrain. Saudi Arabia, you have the floor.
Once again, I would like to thank you for giving us this opportunity. We have a number of remarks on the TEEP report. The KSA delegation thanks TEEP and all the TOCs for the progress report that is a part of the upcoming 2027 report. However, this report did not contain or did not refer to the high ambient temperature countries in its section 3 and did not refer to the high temperature that is one of the problems faced by Article 5 countries, especially in terms of the utilization of refrigeration and air conditioners. This high temperature has an impact on the efficiency on air conditioners and refrigerant gases used. The report did not refer to alternatives that the report has endeavored to focus on its viability. It did not take into consideration the high ambient temperature and also the flammability aspect. Therefore, the high ambient temperature countries, including the GCC countries, give importance to this issue. We know that the low GWP substances are more flammable than the other alternatives. And we believe that there is a kind of controversy in the report in this matter. Also, we need to focus on the toxicity of such substances and also the necessity that they would be taking into consideration the situation in the high ambient temperature. We give due attention to the KIPS, and we believe that the report focused on desk studies and theoretical analysis. We believe that the recommendations were not based on the practical experience, and it did not focus on the refrigerant gases, and therefore we believe that the report may have been such a redrafting of the TOC reports, and that most of the information included in this report stemmed from previous reports and studies without taking into consideration the conditions that we use the cooling gases in, and not taking into consideration the requirements of the different institutions such as factories, schools, as well as hospitals that use such equipment. The report unfortunately did not take in account that the high ambient temperature countries, the temperature can go up to more than 50 Celsius in summer, and this affects life in these countries. This affects housing. This affects industrial facilities and all the sectors, economic and industrial sectors. And therefore, in addition to transport and aviation, can you imagine how can this affect our lives? And I'm going to speak as a normal layman and not a specialized expert. Imagine that I am driving an easily flammable car that has an AC with a flammable gas. At any time I'm driving my car and I'm at this risk just because I have, as a country, my country has abided by KIP and has abided by the international protocols. And therefore, this needs the concertation of efforts of the Montreal Protocol, the party countries and states, as well as the MLF, to cooperate and give the necessary assistance to our beloved countries in the GCC and to help us with the exemptions needed for those countries, included the GCC countries, especially that the GCC countries are respecting the protocol and the amendments and has ratified all the necessary protocols. And unfortunately, the protocol did not take into consideration the situation and the conditions prevailing in those countries, and And I believe that most of these countries do not produce the cooling gases. They are not producers, they are consumers of those gases. The HFC producing countries should also take into consideration the situation in countries of the Article 5 countries, in particular the GCC, and we need help to protect ourselves from a black market in which those gases, refrigerant gases, would be sold at very high prices that would be sold on this black market in such a way that would not be in conformity with the provisions of the 7th article. This kind of cooperation would be the best example of the international cooperation. And this is my contribution as a member of the KSA delegation. I would like the Secretariat, the TEEP, and all the committees to take my intervention in consideration, especially the 2027 report, on the basis of which many decisions will be taken by the state parties. I repeat that all parties, that the circumstances in all countries, including our GCC countries, would be taken into consideration. At the end, I would like to convey to you the greetings of the Saudi delegation.
Then I would like to ask Canada to take the floor, and then Bahrain. And then, Teep, you have a long list of questions to answer, so take good note. So Canada, please.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Well, we'd like first to thank the TEEP for its report. We thought essentially, we thought that it met the requirements of paragraph 5 of decision 28.2. However, we are hearing some of the concerns and ideas for additional factors that would need to be taken into account. So we're just noting these concerns, that perhaps a more detailed assessment was envisaged. I think perhaps the expectation from the TEEP was perhaps different based on the actual decision that was taken. So, in any case, we wanted first to also congratulate Bahrain for the ratification of the Kigali Amendment. Being the third, I think, G2 country to have ratified, and we noticed that they ratified on July 1st on Canada Day. So I think this was just a present that Hassan wanted to give to Canada. So thank you very much. We had just a few questions regarding the information in the air conditioning sector. Some of the alternatives that are put there, we were wondering to what extent it was comprehensive. So for small self-contained air conditioning window units, the only alternatives that is listed is HC290. So we just wanted to know, is that because the TEEP felt this is the only alternative available on the market, or is this the main one? Possibly are there others that are not mentioned here? Similarly, for larger split and package AC, the only alternatives are HFO 1234YF and 1234ZEE. We're wondering if there were others that are either available or being considered for these applications. We imagine that these are important applications in Group 2 countries, particularly countries with high ambient temperature conditions, and that currently there's limited or unknown use of these alternatives in these countries. We also wanted to know if the TEEP had any more information on the capacity of equipment to address high temperature conditions. I mean, I remember we started talking about the hat issue quite a number of years ago, and we think that the observation that cooling equipment degrades in terms of its efficiency and cooling capacity with very high temperature. We've been aware of that for quite some time, and the need to compensate the cooling capacity by having larger sized equipment is something that was also discussed in previous TEEP report. We were just wondering, over the past 10 years since we started discussing this issue, do you have an idea to what extent there has been progress in terms of addressing cooling in high ambient temperature conditions without having a significant penalty on cooling capacity or energy efficiency? You know what I mean? It's like, has there been a change perhaps in the temperature level up to which you could have cooling without necessarily incurring a significant penalty on the capacity or energy efficiency? So just wondering if there has been progress over the past 10 years on this particular issue. Mr. Co-Chair, we may have a few comments, but I think your guidance was just for questions on the stage, but we did hear that there were comments that were being made, so we're kind of just wondering if we should provide our comments now or maybe just wait until after the questions.
My proposal is, good you ask, my proposal would be to wait after the questions. So okay. I know then that you come back, so...
Possibly. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Bahrain, please.
شكرا سيد الرئيس المشارك.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Thank you to the TEEP for this report. I will not comment on the report itself, but I will keep my comments for later as requested, but perhaps I will just raise some questions, things that drew my attention as I read the report. In fact, I have no doubt that the TEEP, TEEP does not have previous intention to do any other than reflecting the reality to serve the countries concerned. I still have not grasped some of the things in order to prove my own conviction. Let's say, for the first question, what are the foundations on which the TEEP relied in order to prove the statistical aspects when it comes to availability of equipment and appliances in the 10 concerned countries in the second group, especially because these are high ambient countries. I hear some of the terms in the report about the availability of alternatives that are low GWP. And it says that these are available in most applications. Most applications, that's the term that's being used. But this has not been reflected. How is it in most applications? This is puzzling for me. On the other hand, we hear talk about these technologies being available, being identical. Say, some of the refrigerants that have low GWP are consistent and harmonious with the applications in the rack. Again, this is very generalized without specifying the harmony existing. So I'm talking about the practical application. So I'm trying to connect the information in the report with the reality that I live. In the schedule 8.4, for example, 8.2, 8.1, this is very large scope, many applications, small split. So to package detected, I see a variety of sizes, small, medium, large, and there is a number of Asians like 32, factor 32. Where is it used in the same amount in the 10 countries? So when you read the report, you would assume that they are available, that they could be used, but this is not the reality. My dear colleague from Kuwait talked about the size of air conditioning, and some of the applications, especially in our countries, are very different from what is available in small, limited applications, 2 to 3 tons. Whereas we use 5, 6, 7 tons or more, even in normal houses. This has not been reflected in the report. So the allusions in the report, it gives you the impression that they are available. I find this a little bit strange. So I'm basically asking the TEEP on which basis you came up with these generalized information. Later on, I will have my own comments about this. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Then the list for questions is exhausted, but I hope TEEP is not exhausted because there are several questions. So please, TEEP, can you start giving the answers? Thank you. Please, Teep. Technician, could you give the floor to Teep?
Thanks a lot. I think you will have to bear with us because some of the questions were repeated from some of the delegates. We'll try to be specific as much as we can, but the answers will not be in any specific order. For the distinguished delegate from India, in terms of the limited accessibility for some Article 5 parties, for some applications, that is based on the information that we were able to gather. And again, in response to the distinguished delegate from Bahrain, I made a very clear statement. It is important to note that there was not enough time and commercial information available to the working group. So the way we collected the information was based on information from the local industries and experts that we collected. So basically we reached out to experts in the respective parties and also information available to us from the local industries. In terms of the low adoption of alternative to air conditioning in some Article 5 parties, I think it depends on like we have mentioned that in other reports, and we were not asked to talk about the adoption, the limited adoption limitation. What we want to ensure and mention here is that the technology is technically feasible. So whether is it propane for small mini splits in air conditioning or R32 or HFC 32 in larger applications, the technology is technically feasible and available in all markets. In terms of transport and low temperature applications, the alternatives for Group 2 parties, transport refrigeration, the alternatives for Group 2 parties are similar to alternatives for global market because this is a global commodity. You want to make sure that the alternative used in one market is used in other markets because the transport refrigeration industry is a global industry. So it is R452A, although there is other lower GWP alternatives being worked on for the lower for low temperature vaccine refrigeration or low temperature refrigeration. The list, I don't remember the list exactly on the top of my head, but we had the vaccine cold chain report about 2 years ago, and the list was comprehensive there.
Thank you. Actually, I would like to go back and discuss what we were trying to do in this report, in this particular report about paragraph 5. We're trying to find the commonalities between the G2 countries that distinguish them from the other countries in Article 5. I would like to remind here also that there are other HAT countries, I think 35 in total, that are part of G2, and we are cognizant that also they face the same challenges. We try to include the challenges that are faced in the HAT countries regarding the application of the technology, concerning the size of the equipment, the energy efficiency, the challenges in services, and some other challenges as well. And we have found that these challenges also apply, as we said, to the other parties in the Group 1 countries, and that's why we did not find this distinguishing factor over there. So we were trying to find out regarding the description of the terms, the growing use or the widespread use. There is a certain dynamism in the markets. The markets are changing all the time. And we, of course, we were dealing with 10 Group 2 countries that have different characteristics and different stages of acceptance of some of the technologies, particularly, for instance, let's say the use of HFC 32 in India for some of the air conditioning equipment. So that's why we were careful in categorizing the use, knowing that we did not have access to complete market data to be able to present that within the report. And I think this, we mentioned, that's why we used those terms to indicate whether there is accessibility to it or not. I'd just like to remind here that when we talk about availability and accessibility, we talk about the availability of the technology on a global basis, while accessibility is addressed on an individual basis, and it's the accessibility of the party to the technology. I will stop here and confer with my colleagues on the other parts.
For the distinguished delegate from Canada, I think the first question about the specific options or alternatives that were not listed in our categories. In fact, what we did is when the market has already moved to a certain alternative, we prefer to just not list too many alternatives and focus on that one, like the case with small self-contained air conditioning equipment. So the market has already moved to propane as the refrigerant of choice, and we didn't just want to list any other alternative. And these are typically very small units. So it is moving from R14A to propane as the refrigerant of choice. The more comprehensive list was available in the R2022 and the 2022 report, but this is a refined list for focusing on Group 2 need. In terms of high ambient temperature countries and the capacity degradation actually with R14A is more or less worse than most other alternatives, and R14A is being adopted at scale in most high ambient temperature countries. So if R14A is being adopted, moving to something like HFC 32 or R454B, we expect energy efficiency to be improved, not a penalty on efficiency. So a better efficiency, not a penalty on efficiency. I hope that answers the question. For the distinguished delegate from Kuwait, I'll try to go through the questions in order. You're trying to give us a big list here. In terms of technically proven, basically the technology exists. The technology works in high ambient temperatures. The technology works in Group 2. So Group 2 is not necessarily high ambient. Group 2 is high ambient, but also includes other parties, India, that is not high ambient temperature. Although we acknowledge that in India, some parts of India is high ambient temperatures. So technically proven is the technology exists in or can work in group 2 parties or not, and we have from the GSO, my colleague here just showed me that less than 5 ton, there are equipment working with alternative refrigerants already, including lower GWP, working in the market. You mentioned that you need larger capacity systems to operate in residential units, and while this is challenging, and we mentioned that during the presentation, the new IEC 6335-2-40 and the ISO 5149 allow for larger refrigerant charges, especially for A2L refrigerant, because now we know how to handle A2L refrigerant. So when A2L refrigerants were first introduced to the market, we were very alarmed. Oh, this is flammable. We don't know how to handle them. But now we are getting more and more experience on how to handle them, how to design systems to better contain them, and to make sure that the system is safe for operation. So you can easily put a 10-ton in a decent size residential application. In terms of KIPS and lack of technology, I think the challenge here is the implementing agencies are always looking for something that is not the typical mainstream. There has been this leapfrogging concept that they were always pushing for. But if you were to just want to do conversion from HFC to lower GWP alternative, the option is there, and you can start right away. Safety and training, we have mentioned that during the slide. It was mentioned on slide number 14. It was the fifth bullet, and we mentioned 2 examples, one in India and one in high ambient temperature party. While we acknowledge that heat is higher than typically acknowledged in other parties, especially in high ambient temperature countries or parties, the HFC industry or the RACHP industry was able to design R410A equipment to operate in HAT when previously it was thought impossible. So 10 years ago, it was thought that R410A equipment cannot operate in high ambient temperature parties. And now you can find R410A equipment in high ambient temperature parties. So we need to acknowledge that it's not an impediment. High ambient temperature, if you design properly, if you do the right optimization, do the proper selection, you can operate properly in high ambient temperatures. When you talked about PFAS issues apply equally to Group 1 and Group 2. So we did not include that as part of our assessment because it applies equally and it was not part of our discussion here. We acknowledge that in the TEEP progress report. I hope that answers your questions. That's it.
We appreciate the party who made the comment regarding flammable refrigerants for mobile air conditioning. We note that low GWP refrigerant, a 2L refrigerant, has been introduced globally by most of the global automotive makers from about 2012 and 100% from 2017 in light-duty vehicles. We have noticed that there is no issue or concern with using this 2L refrigerant and do not find a technical reason why it couldn't be used globally.
I think there were some general questions raised by a number of parties about the information and the expectations for this one-time assessment requested of TEEP to do a technical review specific to G2 parties, so parties can consider any potential changes to the schedule. I would note in terms of the general information that we provided, it was as a result of our sort of experts around the world and familiar with sort of the situation in some G2 parties as the phase-on has transitioned. I would also note that since 2016, Group 2 parties have not done anything. They've actually been quite active, as we noted, by parties here as well as in our report. They've moved forward in terms of their MEPs and standards. They've tested and are operational in terms of some of the equipment adoption. So, I mean, these experiences are very helpful, and I would note to parties that we are noting as sort of the TEEP, the experiences of not just G2, but all Article 5 parties in terms of their phase-down transitions and challenges. Under Decision 28.2, parties requested regular updates on alternatives to HFCs, regular periodic updates by the TEEP every 5 years to consider these factors and any emerging issues. And we note that. And so there's an opportunity within sort of TEEP's, the requested every 5-year report under the Decision 28.2. There's also the quadrennial assessment report, and there's also the sort of standard progress report for TEEP to sort of consider these challenges that continue for parties during the phase down. Thank you.
Thank you, TEEP, for giving us all the answers and the questions. So I think you can go back to your seats. And now I would like to ask, let's say, general comments and also ideas on ways forward. And parties that already expressed, let's say, their general comments during the questions. If you come back, be brief, but let's say there were already some comments made during the question and answer session. I really would like to ask everybody who is going to speak to indicate this very quickly, and because we really would like to speed up. So I have India, Kuwait and Bahrain on my list. And please, if you would like to speak, let it know, and let's say then I would like also to close the list. But first, India.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Mr. Co-Chair, while the TEEP provides update on alternatives in various sectors and subsectors in its annual progress report, the SET technology review in specific to paragraph 5 of Decision 28/2 of the MOF 28, focusing on technical feasibility, economic viability, commercial availability, environmentally sound, safe to use, easy to service and maintain the equipment containing the controlled substances, the potential limitation of their use and their implications for different sectors and subsectors. While low or lower global warming potential technologies are evolving And with rise in global temperatures, countries face unique challenges in adopting these technologies, particularly in larger capacity air conditioning systems, including for household uses. Several countries have been experiencing unprecedented heat waves and significant rise in summer temperatures. This necessitates a revisit of elements defining high ambient temperature countries decided during 2016 as a part of Kigali Amendment. High ambient conditions also result in excessive loads on the operations of the air conditioning systems, especially when they need to be operated for larger duration to cater to the cooling needs. This may also have technology as well as the design implications for countries. Mr. Co-Chair, sustainability of low or lower GWP options presents an overarching challenge which has been highlighted in different parts of the report. Having said so, it is important to also examine the concerns relating to PFAS and implications of these various sectors and subsectors. In recent years, it has been challenging in several countries, including our region, in terms of rising temperature and availability of alternatives, cooling technologies, and its effectiveness in terms of cooling efficiency, accessibility, and affordability of sustainable technologies. Further, carbon emissions from HFC refrigerants and their potential contributions to climate change continue to be critical consideration. With the industry having carried out multiple transitions under the Montreal Protocol, the transitions from HFCs is becoming a difficult proposition for this industry. While countries are making all possible efforts in this direction, there is a need for a long-term sustainable approach for transition of the HVAC industry. Considering the challenges being faced by the countries, it is recommended that some more time be given to address these issues linked with availability, affordability, and reliable sustainable technologies. Mr. Co-Chair, in light of the above, TEEP updates become very relevant for parties to have realistic appreciation of issue, and it is highly important that the TEEP continues to provide updates on the low or lower GWP alternatives, considering the challenge as well as the region-wise distinguishing factors, including for Group 2, Article 5 parties on various criteria mentioned in the paragraph 5 of the said decision 28/2 till 2027. Considering the freeze of 2028 of Article 5, Group 2 parties, a draft decision on this by like-minded parties would enable TEEP to continue its work in this direction. Accordingly, we propose further discussion on this important issue in a contact group. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you. I have a question. You drafted a decision. Are you already going to present it now, or you would like to present it later? The CRP. India, please.
We are in the consultation process. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you very much for this clarification. I have on my list further Kuwait, Bahrain, EU, and the US. And I don't see any others who would like to take the floor, so I would like to close the list. So first, Kuwait.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair, and I would like to thank the TIEP for their answering my questions. I think that as a general comment that it's a little bit of contradictions between their answers. What I listen carefully and I take my notes. When I talk about the implementing agencies, they indicate that they have another way and we didn't look to the SCIPs because for the technology. But it's the same time in the same report, TIEB indicate the energy efficiency project. So why it was not the same issue that this is just a proven project not been working, but you take it as something to put it in the report, but you didn't indicate anything related to the KIBS. So I just want to highlight this one, that sometimes you indicate, sometimes you don't indicate. It depends on the mood of the TIEB who's writing that chapter. So I just want to clarify that one, that KIBS was designed also from the same entity, from the same agencies, but you rely on this project. But for the KIBS, you don't want to rely, because this is a formality of how implementing agency adopt technologies. I think that TIEB mentioned that 410A degradation is very high, but if we want to go to another alternative, it's feasible and it can work. Before 10 years, this is what not feasible to do, but now it's feasible to do. I think in your report, you didn't mention what you are stating now. So could you give us light and indicate and more information about how these been developed and how this technology developed? And I think as a GCC country, we are 6 of the 10 countries, and I already discussed with the most prominent supplier here in this room in 2 days, and the maximum capacities that they can supply for high ambient temperature country with a specific limitation was 6 tons, and the TIEB professor mentioning 10 tons for the hot ambient temperature countries, and this is need to be investigated more. I think that this report has to be updated, and also, as the distinguished delegate from Bahrain was mentioning in his question, we want to understand when you say there is a growing accessibility, what is the percentage at least, not the numbers. We want to understand which percentage, 1%, 2%, 3% in group 2 against group 1, because this will highlight how we want to move. And as Inzia mentioned, that we will freeze very soon, so we need to adopt this technology. I think the report needs to be more advanced, more reliable, and they mentioned directly because of the short of the time they couldn't do that and they couldn't investigate. And I think that in a way we have to look to the consultation that TIEB do with the expert and what type of expert that consultation happened, because we wish to also, as a country, I am very open to have that expert to work for me, because he has so much knowledge more than a lot of the implementing agency experts. So I need to understand these experts so I can discuss with them, because they have solutions that we are not access to these solutions. And I will raise my voice also with my colleague in India that we need to have a contact group to discuss a lot of this terminology that it's being used and how we will access to this one. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then the next speaker on the list is Bahrain.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I would like also to thank the TIEB for their answers and report. In our opinion, this report is not quite successful in tackling realistic issues that are faced by Group 2 parties, especially HAP countries. We all recall when we discussed within the Kigali amendment meetings, we recall that we had causes that led to the creation of Group 2, i.e. the lack of technologies. And while we were waiting for new technologies to be considered and implemented in Group 2 countries. Therefore, these countries did not adopt technologies. They were not existent. We are quite ready to adopt these technologies. This was said since the beginning of the Montreal Protocol. When we present a report, we have to be cognizant of the fact that its content will highly affect HAT countries and Group 2 countries. When it is not sufficient to give consequences, to give lessons by saying this is based on expert opinion. We need statistics. When we present technologies or statistics, we must take into account expertise in those countries. Are technologies accessible and available in those countries? For instance, when in certain sectors, such as the rack sectors, 10 or 12 years ago, we discussed the carbohydrate 600A. When these technologies were presented to us at that time, we accepted them fully. We ensured a market penetration of these technologies. So we do not have any prejudice against any technology, but they must be efficient, they must be technically proven. We spoke about air conditioning. This is not a luxury for hard countries. This is essential and vital for commerce, for the residential sector and other sectors. When we talk about availability of technology, we have to be accurate. How are they available? How much is available? Are they feasible from the commercial point of view and technical point of view? These are elements that have to be studied clearly. In my opinion, the report did not tackle these issues. And I think it is important to take them into account to understand the reality of those countries. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And then I have on my list the EU. Please, EU.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Let me start with thanking the two Group 2 countries that have ratified the Kigali Amendment in this year, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, and we appreciate this. Let me also thank the TIAP for their report, which, according to us, provides a detailed technical review of the alternatives relevant for this group. We appreciate TIAP looked at a broad set of criteria to analyze if the Group 2 parties are in another position than other Article 5 parties when it comes to the availability of equipment. TIA points out that for a number of criteria, such as commercial availability, environment sound, economically viable and cost-effective, safe to use in urban areas with high densities, and ease to maintain or service, the situation in the group of two countries does not distinguish itself from other A5 parties. On the issue of technically proven, we understand that the report indeed indicates a number of potential barriers, but which we also understand can be addressed by specific policy initiatives. We notably note here that for the key sectors where there are large users of HFCs, technologies of relevance to achieve a potential phase down have started to penetrate also the G2 markets, as provided for in the detailed information in tables 8.1 to 8.8. As such, there seems to be similar opportunities and challenges as in other A5 parties to achieve the phase-down schedule. We have noted the interventions made by several parties now that have focused on the need for further information in this context. And as such, we will look into any possible CRP provided. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the last speaker on my list is the US. Please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair, and our thanks to the team for taking the time to walk through the report and to answer questions on it. There are a number of things in that report that we found intriguing, and in particular, we'll also note one of the key findings the TEEP had was not whether or not there's answers to all questions and alternatives in all uses, but that there isn't a unique factor that they were seeing. We think this is important because countries are taking on their own transitions and in their own ways. In the United States, we recently finalized a rule that addressed over 40 separate uses of HFCs and set GWP limits of 150 or 700 for each of those uses, recognizing that those transitions will happen over a period of time. The implementation dates for those transitions are as early as this coming January, January 1st, 2025, through as late as January 1st, 2028. The reason why I note this is because those were taken with a view towards meeting our 70% reduction that happens in 2029. We've already met the freeze and the 40% reduction, and we're looking at that. So from our perspective, there's a period of time that we have to look at. We have to be cognizant that countries will make different choices at the different transitions they want to make in that time frame. So we don't necessarily think that this is a unique issue that requires additional specific work by the TEEP in a separate report, though we are interested to see what India and perhaps other countries put forward. We wanted to instead note that there are other requests for the TEEP to provide information to the parties, and that information will be available in a timely way. We have, of course, the progress reports every year, and we have the quadrennial assessment due in 2026 that will look at alternatives across all sectors and provide information in accordance with decisions taken concerning the quadrennial assessment. We also have a separate request under 28.2, Decision 28.2, that calls for a 5-year assessment on alternatives to HFCs, which will be available in 2027. So we have those 2 reports already coming in. Our question, when we look at whatever is put forward in a draft in a CRP, would be whether or not we need to have something separate, or whether or not the other requests to the TEEP already provide the information that we heard many of our colleagues requesting. And we too are obviously interested in that information, as we are also looking at our own phase down and our own steps that we have to take moving forward. At this point, what we would suggest is that we leave this agenda item open, and that we have an opportunity to see the posted CRP before making a decision as to whether or not this is something that we want to take up in a group, or whether or not it's a discussion that can be held in other ways. So that's our ask, given the busyness of the meeting. The CRPs that are already posted, the groups that have already been formed, we do think it might be better to wait until we see this one posted. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And indeed, you were the last speaker on the list. And let's say the idea forward is indeed to come back as soon as the CRP is posted, and then we can provide a way forward or have a discussion on the way forward. So with that, I would like to hand over to my co-chair Miruza for the next agenda item. And indeed, we are already quite behind schedule, and there are already quite some groups posted and come together, and we have still some let's say, substantive agenda items to cover. So please try to make your interventions short, concise, and focused to the issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. And now we will turn to agenda item 10 on strengthening Montreal Protocol institutions, including combating illegal trade. At the 35th MOP, the parties adopted Decision 35/12 on further strengthening Montreal Protocol institutions, including measures for combating illegal trade. This followed the discussions that began at OEWG45 last year on the outcomes of the workshop held on 2nd July 2023 on strengthening the effective implementation and enforcement of the Montreal Protocol. In paragraph 1 of Decision 35/12, parties were encouraged to facilitate the exchange of information on best practices to prevent illegal trade of controlled substances. Parties were also asked to inform the Secretariat of practices used by entities attempting unauthorized imports of controlled substances. In paragraph 2 of the decision, the Secretariat was requested to provide, before OEWG46 this meeting, and on an annual basis thereafter, a compilation of information provided by parties pursuant to paragraph 1 of Decision 35/12 as well as Decision 34/8. In accordance with this request, the Secretariat has prepared document 46-4 on information provided by parties on this issue. MOP 35 also agreed to include the matter of strengthening Montreal Protocol institutions on the agenda of this meeting. With this note, I would like to invite the Secretariat to give a presentation on its document. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Very much, Madam Co-Chair. So in response to the decision 35/12, the Secretariat prepared this compilation, which builds on the similar note that was prepared for the workshop on institutional strengthening held just before OEWG45 last year. And as you know, the Secretariat sends reminders to all parties to submit on a voluntary basis the cases of illegal trade and controlled substances in response to the decisions that I mentioned on the slide. And since then, since 2022, when the first decision was adopted, the Secretariat has received 713 cases of reported illegal trade by parties, which is available on the online database on our website. And since the last note that we prepared for this decision, for the previous decision, for the workshop, we received additional 154 cases from 8 parties. It's also worth noting that 12 parties, in response to the recent reminder, confirmed that they had no cases of illegal trade to report. So there are about 150 different substances, controlled substances, mentioned in these case studies. And most common are HFCs, especially in the recent years, related to the starting control measures under the Kigali Amendment. And if we sum up the amount of all these substances reported, it comes to about 3,000 metric tons, of which these additional new cases that had been added since last year amount to 1,200 metric tons. In terms of methods of illegal trade, most of them relate to the lack of proper documentation, such as registration of importers with competent authorities, lack of licensing, quota, misdeclarations. There are quite few cases in relation to trade of non-refillable cylinders, which relates to the fact that we have many cases from parties that have restrictions on use of these cylinders. In terms of detection methods, the majority, about 70% of cases relate to detected by customs during their inspections, routine and random checks, as well as some cases mentioned investigation and special operations on site in the market, as well as using intelligence techniques and tip-offs from the market players, as well as data monitoring, trying to reconcile the data, look at discrepancies, and identify the reasons behind them. In terms of enforcement measures, there are different steps usually taken, from seizure, which we define as temporary removal from possession, to confiscation, to permanent removal from possession. And in most of the cases, these offenses are treated under the administrative courts, administrative proceedings, while at the same time, there are also cases reported where this is treated as a criminal offense under the criminal laws. And in terms of the actions applied by parties, as noted in these case studies, in these cases, this varies between monetary fines, the orders to re-export back to the country of origin at the expense of the offenders. In terms of disposal methods used for the detained substances, there is overall preference to remove the substances from the domestic market, either through destruction, permanent destruction, or exporting these countries back to the country of origin. And this is last slide, just to summarize some notable approaches that we mentioned in these cases, all cases. So it's important to continuously engage with customs, capacity building of customs, provision of technological tools like refrigerant identifiers, as well as helping them to develop risk profiles for such trade. Many cases mention the use of automated monitoring systems, such as e-licensing, that connects different sides of the system, allowing real-time comparison of data, discrepancies, and unauthorized transactions. A party mentioned that the licensing system covers also transit operations, meaning the goods that come into temporary possession at the customs before being re-exported, and that party usually liaises with the country of destination through IPIC procedure before authorizing this operation. IPIC also was mentioned as an effective tool to prevent illegal trade at the outset. Some parties also mentioned the importance of public information transparency to create awareness and deter illegal activities by sharing the details of how the regulation in relation to the Montreal Protocol and Kigali Amendment is implemented, displaying also the licenses and quotas and enforcement penalties. And collaboration also has been noted as very important through the establishment of task force and conducting joint enforcement operations between different authorities involved in the enforcement chain. Thank you.
Thank you, Liazat, for your presentation and for the Secretariat's hard work on this paper. We have a CRP posted on this issue, CRP 1 by EU. Therefore, I would now like to turn to EU to introduce this CRP. EU.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. We would like to thank the Secretariat for following up on Decision 3512 and the report we just heard. This is focusing on the question of illegal trade and to get a better overview what is going on based on the information provided by the parties. For us, it is important to keep this agenda item and this matter in discussion by the parties and to take a bit step back and take a broader approach, considering the workshop we had held last year and the fruitful discussions at the 45th OEWG, which resulted in a quite comprehensive list of issues that parties deemed worthwhile to address in the future. We should follow up, and that is the reason why we prepared a quite concise CRP, bringing forward some of the items addressed during the workshop and during the issuing discussions during the open-ended working group last year, to engage further and to take additional steps to the steps already taken. And here also the initiative on atmospheric monitoring was taken in this context, but also the decision on illegal trade taken last year. Our CRP addresses 3 points. One, quite a concrete request to the Secretariat, and that is to have a look into the material and guidance on licensing systems. Because licensing systems are identified as essential for an effective monitoring and implementation of the Montreal Protocol. There are already a wealth of information on the requirements for licensing systems, but it would be very useful for parties, in particular those currently revisiting their administrative systems in view of applying for KIPs, for instance, to have a consolidated and updated version of guidance that could help parties in an effective implementation of licensing system, which is seen as essential. So that would be really a work to synthesize what is already available, and we have a series of documents which address those, but it would be good to have a concise and easily accessible source for this information. Secondly, and that is a bit that builds on the decision 3512, where we just heard the presentation, the compilation of information obtained from parties. And yes, the Secretariat did draw some conclusions from it, which goes a bit beyond what was in principle requested under last year's basis of the information obtained, resulting in recommendations for measures parties could take to address illegal trade. So that would also include then an analysis of usual pattern of illegal behavior. So that would be useful. You have presented elements of it already this year, but to have it on a solid basis, it may be useful to remind of that. Thirdly, and that is a bit looking into the future, we would ask the Secretariat to organize, prior to the open-ended working group next year, a meeting of experts exchanging and discussing potential measures and needs to revisit the compliance mechanism of the Montreal Protocol. Since its inception of the Montreal Protocol, that was never really revisited, although there were some decisions which asked for a review, but that was already nearly 20 years ago. So we are not proposing a repetition of the workshop, but to go one step further, really to ask experts to meet and to have an exchange on potential or discussion on needs and potential options for improving the compliance mechanism, which also includes potentially the working methods of the implementation committee and the way how non-compliance cases could be initiated. That was something which was discussed in the context of the CFC 11 incident, where it was seen as perhaps not ideal that there was not a possibility to have a role for the implementation committee in clarifying the facts, the underlying facts. So here we would really wish to see an open exchange, and that could then result in more concrete options for improvement and decisions next year. With that, I would express our interest to discuss this CRP in a contact group already at this meeting to have a meaningful decision for adoption at the meeting of the parties. Thank you.
Thank you, EU. And now I open the floor for discussion. And on my list, I have Switzerland, United States, Brazil, Canada, Cameroon, India, and Senegal and Tunisia. And if you would like to take the floor, please indicate it now, because we are also very close to lunchtime. Now I would give the floor to Switzerland.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Switzerland would like to thank parties that have provided information on illegal trade and best practices to prevent it, as well as the Secretariat for compiling this information in a comprehensive way. We would like to briefly reflect on strengthening the Montreal Protocol institution in a more general way. Strengthening institutional processes remains a very important task. The Montreal Protocol will soon be 40 years old, and some processes might need to be updated, improved, or further developed to allow the protocol to keep delivering on its objectives. It is not the first time that we discuss this. We have developed together and discussed already also together good elements. And Switzerland is convinced that we can maintain the momentum and make progress during this meeting already. We therefore thank the European Union for their proposal to further develop our work in this area. And we are very much interested in participating in the discussion. Therefore, we would welcome a contact group on that matter that would allow us to discuss the CRP and to look together for the way forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now I would like to give the floor to United States.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair, and we'd like to express our appreciation to the Secretariat for the work they did to pull together the compilation that they provided. We thought it was very detailed, very useful, and very helpful to us as we were thinking through this issue. We also realize it's the first time that the Secretariat pulled together data, not just on completed cases, but information on practices, and shared that information with the parties. We found that document to help us in our own domestic efforts to ensure that we are combating illegal trade. We also think it is useful as a way forward to help us think about how best we can share information with other parties and perhaps work either through this body or through other bilateral engagement or multilateral engagement to ensure we are effectively preventing illegal trade in HFCs and ODS. With regards to the CRP that has been put forward by the European Union, there are a number of paragraphs in there where we can see some potential areas of common ground to move forward and think about a pathway for something that could be put forward as a decision at the meeting in the fall. In particular, licensing systems is an area for which we also agree there are some lessons learned, and there are some areas for which best practices could be improved. We saw information in the Secretariat's report on this. We've seen information through other meetings this year that indicate that strong licensing systems are essential to ensuring that parties are aware of import, export, production, destruction, other activities in their country. We do think that that is an area where we can find common ground to move forward, and we would like to have a discussion on that. We also think that there are other parts of that decision that would be an interesting place for a discussion. That said, we're not sure if some of the language in that decision seems to predetermine a path forward that we may or may not be ready to make. For example, we could see where it might be useful to have a more open discussion, perhaps a workshop or some other way to bring the parties together to talk about things like compliance mechanisms and other aspects without sort of trying to bring in some sort of outside expertise at this early stage. That said, we're certainly open to a conversation and discussion. We have a few thoughts of our own that we don't see reflected in that CRP, and we'll be thinking about language we could put forward in whatever fora that this co-chair decides is the best way for us to move forward. We'd appreciate making sure there is time, though, allotted for this discussion at the meeting this week, and would appreciate guidance from the Secretariat at what would be the right timeline for that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will read the list now, and then after that, I will also close the list. So on my list, I have Brazil, Canada, Cameroon, India, Senegal, Tunisia, Guinea, Benin, Lesotho, and Malaysia. With this, I will close the list and would like to give the floor to Brazil.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. First of all, we would like to thank the Secretariat for their efforts and also the European Union for posting the CRP. This is an issue that this delegation has been engaged in actively, and we also have contributed to the adoption of Decision 35/12 last year. We look forward to discussing this matter further on a contact group. But overall, we would like to understand, in relation to paragraph 1 of the CRP, whether a guidance document would be the best way forward at this stage, since we also need to take into account our national circumstances. We are very much interested in improving our licensing system, but maybe the approach proposed on paragraph 1 would not be the best one. Maybe we could explore other options. On paragraph 2, given that the Secretariat already prepares a presentation and a document to inform parties, as they have done now, we wanted to understand a little bit more the added value behind this additional reference, and also the recommendations expected from the Secretariat. If the Secretariat is to take a more prescriptive approach, we must make sure that all delegations are comfortable with this. Finally, on paragraph 3, we were curious about the details of this proposed meeting of experts, such as the number of experts involved, the selection or nominations of experts, if any, regional representation, if that will be taken into account, and so forth. We wanted to understand a little bit more the details of this new setting. Overall, we look forward to engaging with delegations in a more informal setting, and we would appreciate having enough time to discuss in this matter in this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Next, I have Canada on the list. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I'd like to thank the Secretariat for its report and the European Union for submitting the CRP. As we all know, the parties have had many discussions over the past years on the issue of strengthening Montreal Protocol institutions. And these discussions, as rightly pointed by the European Union, have led to decisions that have that generated useful information for parties and actions, such as we've seen for regional atmospheric monitoring. And we note that in the CRP that Such information that has been discussed in the past is also included once again in this proposal. And we do have a few questions on those, similarly to the distinguished delegate from Brazil. With regards to the guidance document for the establishment of licensing systems, as noted by the European Union, there are a few documents already in existence that provide that information. We understand this information is not necessarily collated in one area. However, we'd be interested in discussing whether or not, the approach to consolidate that information is really the best value added for parties. So that is an area of interest to us. And we recognize the importance of licensing systems as presented in the Secretariat's report. So we'd be really interested in continuing that discussion on that aspect. On the second proposal with regards to the compilation, continuing the compilation of information submitted in response to decision 3512, but with added analysis from the Secretariat, this is an area where we'd like to discuss further as well to ensure that information that would be included in a potential decision would be clear and would guide the Secretariat for the type of analysis information that would be beneficial for parties. And finally, with regards to the request to convene a meeting of experts, we don't object to this idea. We think there is merit in discussing the compliance mechanism itself. However, the way the CRP is currently portrayed, raises a number of questions for us in terms of, what is an expert? How do we define who are the experts? Whether or not a meeting ahead of the next OEWG is the best venue for that. Could that be taken up in a contact group? Could work be done intersessionally with online sessions to minimize budgetary implications? So those are a number of things that we'd like to discuss and explore. And we would like to continue the discussion and are supportive of having a discussion at this meeting when possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Canada. And now I give the floor to Cameroon. Delegates, we would really request to be very brief so that I could finish this agenda item before lunch. Thank you. And I give the floor to Cameroon.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair, for giving me the floor. I want to thank the presentation made so far by the Secretary for us to understand exactly what this is, the need for this this paper. I want to say that considering the information on the way of dealing with illegal trade, production, and of illegal trade in controlled substances under the Montreal Protocol, and also identify the potential gaps in the non-compliance procedure, challenges that we've actually seen, and also the ideas of how to improve of these various challenges that I've listed. We use in support of the CRP presented by EU, and we look forward to work with them, especially in the contact group that will be established. Basically, we want to be looking at preparing the guidance document on the establishment of operational license system, given the fact that we have the Cape, most of the countries are implementing, and it's really vast, and also looking at the relevant sources of identifying options for addressing cases of illegal trade. There are one of the questions, one of the issues remains here, how the third part of it, the composition of experts, how it's going to be, what's the nature, and how we're going to carry on the composition of the expert group to exactly look at this part. Thank you very much, Co-Chair.
Thank you. And now I would like to give the floor to India.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. We would like to thank the Ozone Secretariat for the information on illegal trade in and production and consumption of controlled substances. We would also like to thank the EU for the CRP regarding the proposed guidelines document on the establishment and operation of licensing system. There are national processes, frameworks which have been working quite well. Accordingly, we need a better understanding of the rationale and scope of the proposed guidance document. Secondly, we need more clarity on the proposed para 2 relating to analysis to be done by the Ozone Secretariat of the annual compilation of information pursuant to decision 35/12 and of other relevant sources, and identifying options for addressing cases of illegal trade. Regarding para 3, proposing the Ozone Secretariat to convene a meeting of experts, we would like to have more understanding of the modalities for regarding the proposed meeting and associating of proposed experts. We feel Ozone Secretariat can continue to provide updated information to parties and would be happy to discuss further on this issue. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you, India. And on my list, Senegal. So I give the floor to Senegal.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. We wish to join other speakers who have already congratulated the European Union on the submission of this CRP1, which is very important for all of us, especially to the Secretariat, for having compiled all of the data. We have observed that there are a large number of countries with licensing systems, but nonetheless, there still continues to be an illegal trade in substances controlled under the Montreal Protocol. As for these figures, we can see that there are many others that have not been covered because customs do not cover all issues, including, especially in the light of the porous borders between countries. And this is why CRP is of tremendous interest to us, and we hope to see this implemented to have more comprehensive guidelines issued for combating this illegal trade. We wish to see whether the time that has been allotted, whether this time is sufficient for the workshop to be carried out and for the decisions to be taken for the next Conference of Parties. Perhaps the European Union or the Secretariat could kindly provide us with more information about this, the steps to be undertaken for the time to be used most judiciously under the proposal of the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you. And I give the floor to Tunisia.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I would like to thank the European Union for this CRP so that we can strengthen the international efforts to combat illegal trade. I would like to thank the Ozone Secretariat for the report. In this regard, in order to combat illegal trade, we have to call upon the institutions that are involved in the import of the substances, the controlled substances. They have to cooperate and give the necessary guidance to those companies and also to the custom departments so that the pre-authorization documents would be available, and we are ready to participate in the contact group to discuss this paper.
Thank you. And Guinea, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I wish to warmly thank the Secretariat for having introduced this agenda item, and I also wish to thank the countries and the parties that have communicated this data, who have adopted measures to counter illegal trade and perpetrators thereof. I now turn to the CRP submitted by the European Union. Madam Co-Chair, there is a need to control both imports and exports of all substances which deplete the ozone layer by all parties, as is stipulated under the Montreal Amendment to the Montreal Protocol. There's also the spirit of the need for the work carried out in updating measures to counter this illegal trade as part of the strategic management for chemical production. And we today observed that there are shortcomings in this regard, and we need to analyze whether certain parties have certain advantages or benefits in best practices in countering illegal trade. And for this reason, there's an important need to establish an institution building and institution strengthening system to counter illegal trade by identifying by highlighting not just detention, export, and transit. And for this reason, I join other countries in calling for the establishment of a contact group to have more in-depth analysis on this CRP, and we stand ready to contribute to this effort. Thank you.
Thank you, and I give the floor to Benin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Following other speakers, we also wish to thank the Secretariat for this summary, and we specifically thank those countries who have provided data. And in the next compilation, there will be other countries. The illegal trade is a very relevant issue, and this is an issue which goes beyond the prerogatives of national offices in various countries, but also it covers all state parties, all stakeholders related to this trade, and this requires oversight in capacity building. But beyond this, there is significant support for the submission of the European Union vis-à-vis the CRP, and especially vis-à-vis the establishment of the contact group, which we support the establishment thereof to ensure that there be an in-depth consideration of how to address this nefarious phenomenon. Thank you.
Thank you, and I give the floor to Malaysia now. Malaysia.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Malaysia delegation would like to thank the Secretariat for compiling the information and also the data on combating illegal trade. And Malaysia recognized that there is room for improvement in the international process of dealing with illegal trading of controlled substance under the Montreal Protocol. Like others Article 5 Group 1 parties, Malaysia started to control the importation of HFCs and HFCs blend on 1st January 2024 through the approved permit and quota allocation. The control of the importation of controlled substances under the Montreal Protocol is getting more and more challenging as the numbers of type of those chemicals is increasing with different blends while phase out the HCFC. Compilation of information on illegal trade and production and consumption of controlled substance reported by parties is a good reference and lesson learned for the parties to strengthen the international and regulatory framework to combat the illegal trade. We noted that there are alarming cases of illegal importation and trade under the others MEA that prompted us to take precautionary actions and elevate the enforcement activities. Those illegal activities could damage the environment, risk the health of the local community, and cause leakage to the state and national revenue. Malaysia will continue to the effort to ensure compliance with the obligation under the Montreal Protocol, and we look forward to further discussion in this matter. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you, Malaysia. And when I closed the list, Malaysia was the last one on my list. And we see there's a clear interest to discuss this issue in a contact group, and therefore the proposal from the co-chairs is to establish a contact group. And those who would like to discuss this, please join the contact group for further discussions. The date, time, and the room for this meeting, we will announce it on the screen. And since it's the lunchtime, we would like to close the plenary now. And if the Secretariat could post the contact group meeting schedule? Yes. We will have the HELON's contact group this afternoon, and the co-chairs for the group is Andrew Clark from USA and Ali from Saudi Arabia. Have a good lunch, everyone, and come here. Oh, and there's an announcement from the Secretariat.
Thank you, co-chairs. Good afternoon, delegates. The provisional list of participants is available on the meeting portal under the Post Sessions tab. Please use the indicated password to submit any corrections to Betty Kamanga and Jacqueline Gitao by the 17th of July, after which the final list of participants will be posted on the portal by the 26th of this month. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. And now we close for lunch. Thank you, everyone.